You've thrown yourself into the middle of this argument with a motion you've put forward before the Belfast City Council. What exactly were you calling for, and what sort of backing did you receive from the rest of the councillors?
Well, what I was trying to do was start a debate about bringing down the peace walls. Obviously, they're not going to come down tomorrow, but I thought it was important to start the debate because we have a divided city, a physically divided city, obviously politically, religiously, and even psychologically divided, but we have to start the debate. We have to get people working towards bringing together our society, and that's why I brought forward the motion to Belfast City Council. In terms of support, well, it's hard to say because there was no actual vote on it. There were some fairly negative responses from the DUP benches. There was support from the Alliance Party, and there was silence from Sinn Féin. So it's very, very hard to judge the level of political support.
But it was passed off to the Good Relations Steering Group, was that right?
It was passed to the Good Relations Steering Group for them to examine. And what I was saying was, let's not just commit ourselves to the idea of bringing down these walls, but let's set up a working party to look at ways and means of actually accomplishing that.
With respect though, it sounds like more of the same old thing. Discussions, seminars, debate. Where's the action when it comes to all this?
Well, included in my motion was a specific commitment to action, a specific commitment towards ways and means of actually achieving the ending to the barriers that litter our city. I mean, for example, let me put one idea across to you. There are some barriers as opposed to walls that exist and divide our city. Why not let's look at those barriers that are simply steel barriers preventing cars going up a street. Let's look at them in a creative way and see, can we remove them? Can we put in, for example, one-way systems? Can we in some way create a situation where in fact we no longer have those mini physical barriers? That would be a first step. And then we can work towards a greater community dialogue on dealing with the bigger walls that exist in our city. But the first step for a politician like me is to create a debate. We haven't had a debate, with respect. We haven't had a debate. Nobody has ever said take the walls down. I'm saying that. So let's get a public debate going with the local communities, with the politicians, with the City Council, even with the Assembly. Let's work on this now.
This US-Ireland Alliance research shows that 61% of the people want the politicians, that's you, to pull the finger out. Why isn't this issue high on the agenda?
Well, I've put it on the agenda.
But why to date hasn't it been?
Well, I think the reason is this. I think that there's been a reluctance, given the fact that there's been so much political instability, even since the Good Friday Agreement. I mean, many of these barriers have gone up since the Good Friday Agreement. They're not just gone up during the course of the Troubles. The political instability did not provide a suitable political atmosphere in which these issues could be addressed. Now we do have at least the semblance of political stability. We do have a power-sharing government in which Sinn Féin are involved together with the DUP. Nobody expected that, but there it is. That's a good thing. That's a positive development for all of us. Let's work on the basis that we have now a secure political system in which we can address these issues. As a political person, as a politician, I have to give leadership on issues. My party has to give leadership. Other politicians have to do likewise. This is now an opportunity for doing that. The majority of people living along these walls actually want them to go at some stage. But you have to build a sufficient level of confidence to allow people that live here to be confident enough and comfortable enough with the absence of those walls to live reasonable lives.
And from what you see, are there people who use the walls to play on the fears of the community?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is one of the challenges for politicians. Why do some politicians in some way feel that the walls should remain? That's a question to put to those politicians. Do you want, in fact, to retain these walls as political divisions so that you can exploit those divisions, so that you can continue to have a constituency of support? And that is a challenge for politicians. Maybe unconsciously they do that. Maybe sometimes consciously they do it. But I am determined to try and create a situation here where communities can come together that they can bond together and they can live together in reconciliation and in partnership.
Now, number 77 bus story, enlighten me.
Well, you're too young to appreciate the 77 bus. The 77 bus went from the waterworks right across the middle of the inner city, right across to the gasworks. Now, the route went along Manor Street, it went along Agnes Street, it went along Northumberland Street, down Collontree Road, across Albert Street and across the bridge and then to the gasworks. So you can see, if you follow that route mentally, you can see in fact that it was going right across the city and it was cross-community. So that people could travel freely across this city. There were no barriers that prevented them. So the 77 bus, I've often said, the 77 bus, when it is back on again, we will know that we will have achieved a full peace.
58% of the people in this research said that they wouldn't have confidence in the PSNI to preserve the peace if the walls came down. The PSNI are now part of the problem. Their poor performance is actually an obstacle to change.
I think there's a tremendous onus on the police to show to people living in areas such as this that they are strong enough, big enough, efficient enough and effective enough to preserve the peace for people on both sides of the political divide. If they are not able to demonstrate that, then people will not be able to have confidence in living peacefully, side by side, cheek by jowl with one another. So it's a huge challenge for the police. It's a huge challenge for the PSNI to get their act in order so that people will have true confidence in living with them as the custodians of law and order.
These days, the 77 operates as a bus for hire for weddings and special occasions, that sort of thing. Will the route ever return? Who knows? For that to happen, police has to change things on the ground. Next up, Antrim Road Cop Shop. So Nigel, there seems to be a lot of rumour and hearsay around violent incidents at interfaces. Be good if you could clear this up. Just outline for us exactly what are the nature of these attacks and who in particular is causing them, because there does seem to be some confusion.
There are various types of incidents that happen at those, which range from quite serious to much less serious. I suppose at the lower end of the scale, what predominantly happens is young kids get involved in a bit of stoning, maybe particularly around holiday periods when they're off school and so forth. And it really doesn't amount to much more than that. Having said that, experience shows that if that's not dealt with, then very often things can escalate and get out of hand and the incidents get more serious to the point where somebody maybe gets seriously hurt. At the end of the day, you've got to go back to the roots of why these walls are there. First and foremost, those walls or barriers, or whatever they are, they're there because the communities living on either side of those walls wanted them there. They didn't feel safe, they felt threatened. So they do provide a reassurance, and that's why it's important that, you know, whenever the time comes for them to be taken down, that the communities themselves are absolutely key in terms of saying when that happens and how it happens.
I guess this seems to feed into your approach to antisocial behaviour, something that's fair to say you're struggling to get to grips with at the minute. What's going to change that scenario? More powers needed?
We use a range of things to deal with antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour orders is the more recent piece of legislation, and that is increasingly being used, not just in this district but in others. And certainly we're looking at our colleagues across the water and in other police services who have got different pieces of legislation, for example, which allow them to disperse crowds of young people or to prohibit crowds of young people from gathering in certain areas. We're certainly looking at that, and you know, we would play our part in terms of you know, lobbying government and advising government in terms of whether those sorts of powers would be of benefit here. You know, antisocial behaviour is not an easy thing to crack. It's complicated because there's a whole lot of reasons why it happens, and therefore we need a range of things to deal with it. So we'll play our part in terms of any new legislation that's brought forward.